All right, hello and welcome to today's webinar session. We're very excited to be hosting this session on breaking down data barriers and increasing safety awareness, leveraging the Numetric platform. Before we get started and introduce our presenter, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. We'd like to be respectful of everyone's time, so we're going to do our best to keep this to 1 hour. The audio can be accessed through your computer, or you can dial into your phone. And if you're having any issues with the audio, please use the chat and we'll do our best to get that squared away as quickly as possible. We are going to be leaving about 10 minutes at the end for some Q&A. And if you do have a question throughout the webinar, the presentation, there's a Q&A button in Zoom. Please ask your questions there, and we will tackle as many of those as we can at the end of the session. There will be some live demonstration of the Numetric platform, and so I would recommend utilizing the full screen feature for that. And there will be a recording that will be made available on our Numetric website. A link will be sent to each of you who is registered. So we will get that out to you within the next 48 hours. And thank you for being here with us today. Now I'd like to quickly introduce myself and our presenter. My name is Jake Mawai. I'm one of the senior account managers here at Numetric, and I've worked with a number of transportation and safety agencies, working with crash and roadway and asset data. I've been fortunate enough to work with Joseph Weiss, our presenter. Joseph is a transportation analyst at Rutgers University, and he works at the Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation in New Jersey. Joe has an amazing story to tell on the progress he has made in breaking down data silos within the state of New Jersey. So Joe, I'll turn the time over to you and let you get into it.
Excellent. Can you hear me? Hope so.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, and thank you, Jake, for the introduction. My name is Joseph Weiss, and I am a transportation safety analyst at the Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation at Rutgers University. I conduct kind of comprehensive analyses to support all the decision-making processes and reporting on trends that we see in motor vehicle crashes here in the state of New Jersey. I've spent about the past 4 years looking at crash data, everything from just property damage only crashes all the way up to our more severe and fatal crashes. I work with engineering departments. I help them locate some problematic roadway curves, some dangerous intersections, or stretches of roadways that maybe need better signage or some sort of safety infrastructure improvement. I really work heavily with our law enforcement agencies, and I try to help them understand and give them the information that they need to better educate drivers on the roadways, as well as enforce some of these driving behaviors. I work with a number of other organizations as well, such as the AAA Alliance. We work heavily with them to try to kind of guide them in some of the trends that we see in New Jersey to help with legislative matters. We also partner heavily with our TMA councils, or all of our transportation management associations here in New Jersey. We have 7 of them. They're kind of our boots on the ground. So they're our direct interface in our state with the public and communities, large and small. So we definitely partner with them to try to get them the information that they need. We also work with another, as an example, with another organization called the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey. They're a group that educates, one of the programs they have rather, educates high school students about the importance of our graduated driver's license program that we have here in the state, how to respect seatbelt laws, wearing bicycle helmets. Basically, I provide information to allow our safety professionals in the state teach best practices and ultimately trying to keep our roadways as safe as possible. My work at CAIT is all about data, and we need some sort of software or tool that supports our work, not only here at Rutgers University, but with the Division of Highway Traffic Safety of New Jersey. About 2 years ago, we started thinking about ways on not recreating the wheel, but how do we improve the wheel? How do we take the same information that we've been using and maintaining over these past several decades, and how do we make it more efficient, right? There's no one size fits all approach to any of this. Every state is different. Every agency collects their own information. They have different data system owners, and they've been maintaining and using their own data really since the beginning of time. As researchers and analysts, though, we know that we can always improve, right, the way that we digest and interpret information, especially when we're dealing with such large databases. We thought about how different system owners interact with their own data and how they are able or maybe not able to filter, manipulate their immense databases to actually tell you something. A lot of the agencies that we work with in different ways and abilities go into their system and they could tease out information that they may or may not need. But we found that those old processes were very tedious and time consuming. And as a result, sometimes that level of effort really led to no effort at all because of how tedious and time consuming that process would have been. So we knew that there had to be a better way. And I'm a visual person. I like to see images, pictures, charts, to really, kind of paint what's going on with some sort of phenomena, in this case, crash data. I like to draw things out in order to explain things. So, what a better way than to, draw things out for everybody. One of my favorite quotes is from Steve Jobs. He says that people don't know what they want until you show it to them. I found this to really be super true. We found working with our safety partners in the state, be it law enforcement, engineering, county engineers, state engineers, our Department of Transportation, Motor Vehicle Commission, and so on. We found that they already had what they needed, but they were limiting themselves to the possibilities out there, right? We're trying to introduce a new idea to them, and we found that the best way is to draw it out for them and show them what it is that we're talking about, instead of just talking about the things that we can do with their data. This is the kind of the principle that we strive for at CAIT, to kind of be the cutting edge of technology, whether it's engineering or safety related. We knew that the best strategy to move forward was to kind of master one data set or one database, and then make connections on how we would integrate information should we have access to it in the future. Again, it kind of goes back to that idea of showing them what they want. So we focus mostly on crash data, right? Since that's kind of the industry that we're coming from and the wheelhouse that I'm coming from. So I'm going to go through some of our lessons that we've learned while we've built out this crash data visualization tool. We're still, I wouldn't say the beginning stages, but we've definitely learned a lot over the past few years, and we wanted to share our story with you guys. So the biggest hurdle that we run into, and that I'm sure many of you run into in your states, is the, getting your hands on the actual data itself, facing that what are you going to do with it question. A lot of times I've found that, the answer being research isn't really appropriate or acceptable. We would love to have information from places like the Department of Health or the Office of the Courts, get access to more of the maintenance and operations data from the DOT sphere, licensure information from motor vehicle records. We would love to have access to all this information, but many of it is very private or sensitive to an individual. So we're always faced with that. Well, what do you need this data for? What are you going to do with it? They're really weary. A lot of the system owners, they're weary to provide this information, right? Because the data consumers, they might not be the most analytical or computer savvy. They may not know the crash database in this particular example as intimate as the owners themselves. It leaves room for misinterpretation of what's actually happening out on the streets, and essentially allows a lay user to derive their own conclusions without really knowing the full extent of the data itself. So this puts sensitive, or what we like to call hot information, into any person's hands, right? And that could be dangerous, especially if you aren't able to provide that clarity or some sort of interpretive definition of what it is that they're looking at. And I'll go through some of these examples in a bit. We also run into a lot of privacy issues. Again, health information, that's probably one of the most difficult data sets to obtain because of some of the laws surrounding those databases. But again, a lot of the data sets, citation records have identifiable information, so does motor vehicle. And again, it's more, how do we get over the hurdle of the sensitivity of the data we're trying to obtain? We also run into technology issues, or maybe some folks have poor quality data and maybe they're a little reluctant to share it with us. Sometimes their systems, their data systems are very antiquated, and they have a difficult time actually pulling raw data out of the system, or many other technical issues. So all these things, they create a reluctance to share information, to collaborate with other agencies in really, again, improving the wheel. And ultimately it finds us back at that step one of, well, what are you going to do with the data? All right, so how do we break down these barriers? And we do have some opportunities available to us. Simple enough, we have to build, a trusting relationship with the data owners. Again, we're currently working with the data set that we know pretty intimately, crash data, and all of the tables that kind of complement that crash table. And we want to build something that can show people and provide demonstrations on how we would go about integrating data sets should we have the information moving forward. With our tool, we were able to build this trust by letting them know that we control who accesses the data, right? So it's not a public facing kind of platform where anybody, anywhere can come in and see what's happening in New Jersey, thus maybe misinterpreting that information. We can control how they access it and how they're able to analyze the data. In the back end, we're able to kind of control different fields of what's searchable and what's not searchable, really tailor the user's experience in their crash data querying. And we like to provide support to these individuals, whether it's through training and classes or over the phone support and everything in between. So like, think of kind of like a help desk for users. So if we're able to control how many people and who is accessing the system, we now know who these individuals are, and we can reach out to them on a one-on-one basis and kind of provide that level of technical support that may or may not be needed. So I'm going to go over the top 5 ways that that CAIT succeeded at data sharing and making sure that we got all of our partners on board. Again, like I said before, every state and agency and data owner is different. This is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach, but I think that different lessons can be gleaned from our personal experience over the past 2 years. So the first step, I guess one of the first ways that we were able to succeed in our data sharing was, first and foremost, getting buy-in from the data owners themselves. This is their data, this is their information. They've been using it for forever. It fulfills all of their needs already. What do you need this information for? Again, people don't know what they don't want until you show, or what they want until you show it to them. So we need to convince them of the value of sharing the data, right? We found that the system owners, for the most part, like I said, they're collecting data that they need. They didn't see a reason to share it with everyone. They were able to get all the info they needed to tell them what was going on in their respective line of work. They weren't really researchers or analysts, and they didn't necessarily see the value that could be added if we integrated their database with another database. Or if you ultimately presented the same information that they've been working with through a different means. We learned that you can't just tell them what can be done with the info, that you have to show them. We also committed to protecting them from potential conflicts, some of the things I just outlined before, restricting that hot information to specific users, and unless it's absolutely necessary, we can specifically request that, data that they're giving us does not contain any personal information. That's usually something that was always positively received, in my opinion, and my experience was, when we're asking for large data sets, I'll say, hey, don't give me driver's names or driver's license numbers, hold that personal information. Just give me something that's redacted, so this way everyone's protected. The second step was kind of, again, being selective with who is consuming our data, right? who is accessing it. Interagencies, are they stakeholders, the general public? In our case, we limited our information that was accessible to basically contracted safety professionals. So folks that were public and private that had active contracts with either the New Jersey Department of Transportation or the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety, as well as folks within the safety industry. So that's our police departments, our EMS squads, state police, state county engineers, state county planners, and a lot of our safety professionals that we mentioned at the beginning. We also wanted to restrict the use of our analysis tool. We didn't necessarily want to give this public information out to insurance companies or consulting and engineering firms that didn't necessarily have contracts with either our organization or the Department of Transportation. Ultimately, we wanted to focus all of our technical assistance and bandwidth to folks that we partner with and that we engage in safety activities. We also wanted to be sure that the folks that we're giving access to the system have a general understanding of what crash data is. Because again, it could be really complicated or misleading depending on who is interpreting the information involved. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration how we do that. If I can jump out of here, there we go. So within the window in our settings, we have a whole list of users that we can select different tiers of users. So we can give them administrative capabilities or regular user capabilities, or guest. Guest is basically view only. Regular users allows them to kind of digest a lot of the information and kind of interact with it a little bit more freely. And we basically just invite new users through this portal that Numetrics created for us. Right, and we can select a different user. We just pop in their email address and they automatically get generated in an email. So this gives us the ultimate control of who's accessing what. And in the back end, we can always see the analytics of where are they accessing it from, how many times are they accessing the system, really giving us that user profile for every single one of our users. And we can also see all the individuals that haven't accepted some of their invitations. Some of these are pretty outdated. I have to clean them up. So ultimately, we have a really cool portal to kind of control who's consuming our information. Probably the most important thing is providing an easy to use system, something that, anyone can pick up depending on their technical capabilities. And this is important not only for our users, but for us as the administrators as well. We definitely needed something that was intuitive, right? That allowed us to dive deeper into our data, to see where we can make additional connections that we haven't been able to make previously within the database that we've already been working with. One of the more important things that we wanted, something that appeals again to all skill levels. We have just a pantheon of different users from young tech savvy planners that want everything available on their smartphones to some retired police police officers that have dedicated a lot of their free time in promoting safety in their communities. So we really have such a multitude of different skill sets and different understandings of how to use data, and this tool really provided that platform for us. Again, going back to those young tech savvy guys, they needed this to be accessible anywhere. We have a lot of young police officers that while they're sitting in their cruisers doing detail, they're able to actually look at on a fly where some of these crashes have been taking place in their town. They can access, so long as they have internet, they can access this information anywhere. We needed something that was customizable, definitely. Again, not just for the user, but for us as well. So, folks are able to go into the system, they can customize their own queries and search for any field that we collect on our police accident reports. But we also needed something that we on the back end, administrators, could enhance our data set, create maybe new calculated fields, maybe attribute crash severity weights to each of our crash cases, things that aren't necessarily being captured at the scene, but could be added later because of derived data elements. We even created additional searchable features. So we were able to kind of flag crashes in a yes and no fashion of whether or not they were pedestrian related or bike related or drunk driving, drug driving, older driver, young drivers. We have about 15 to 20 different emphasis areas that we like to focus on, and we were able to create all of those within this system. And probably the coolest thing that I like about the tool is the ability to share queries. So not only does that enable a user to kind of collaborate with a safety partner, but it also enhances my ability to provide technical support. So folks can now kind of go into the system, create a query, and they can reach out to me and I can provide that over the phone assistance. I'm going to jump out and show you real fast what we're talking about. So for example, we created emphasis area columns. So I could just type in something like pedestrian, and it gives me a whole bunch of drop downs. All of these fields and groupings were customized by us. So we got to select which fields were selectable or which ones weren't selectable. We were able to create this column, for example, pedestrian involved. Right off the bat, it's only going to show crashes now in our state that where one or more pedestrians was involved in a crash. Then I can quickly on the sidebar just look at the past 5 years maybe, and really get a better more relevant recent picture as to how many crashes have been taking place with pedestrians. It allows me to jump into more stats, and I can look at some trends that I may not have seen. You would think pedestrian crashes would take place more in the warmer months, right? May, June, July, and August. But we actually found here that October, November, and December in New Jersey seem to have the most number of pedestrian crashes. So I can quickly just filter for those months just by with a click of a mouse, and I can see how all of the other data within this enormous data set kind of talks to it and how it interacts with it. So just looking at October, November, and December, looks like our 4 to 8 p.m. intervals is when the most amount of pedestrian crashes are taking place. And now I can actually zoom in and see where all of those crashes are taking place on the map and really adjust my enforcement strategies, my education strategies to really make better data-driven decisions to make our streets safer. I can save these queries. I can name it anything I want. For this purpose, I'll just name it test. Automatically, I've saved that. And if I need to collaborate with a safety partner and say, hey, take a look at some of these pedestrian involved crashes taking place at the end of the year, I can share that with anybody that has access to our system. And I can give them either view permissions, or if I trust them, I can give them edit permissions as well, and they can continue the analysis and really enhance what it is that I'm working on. And then all of the queries that you end up saving, they get stored in a table of contents, and yours, usually the users, is much more cleaner. I have access to all of them. They would only have access to the ones that they've created or shared. So we found it to be unbelievably organized and customizable, and really able to kind of share this information with anybody else that has access to the system. We're also to create these dashboards, what we call workbooks. It kind of provides a high-level overview of all of the crashes, and we started breaking down this data for them in a number of different ways. So by time of day and by crash types, and they can interact with any one of these charts and graphs, and it will automatically filter the entire data set. So again, we're taking 3.5 million crash records where there's over 7 million vehicles involved. And just with the click of a mouse, they're able to quickly filter and kind of interpret what's happening in the areas that they're interested in. We're also able to customize these where I can drill down the data, so I can have specific lenses. So I can look at, say, Middlesex County. Now I can look at how many crashes in Middlesex County were pedestrian involved or not pedestrian involved. Luckily, not many were. I can select the pedestrian involved ones, and then it drills down even further into, well, how many of those pedestrian involved crashes in Middlesex County occurred within an intersection. And just like that, I was able to quickly kind of provide this drill down to our users, and they're able to interpret the information very relatively cleanly. There's no second guessing. They have a lot of confidence in their return, and they're able to kind of produce results that, you know, are data driven. Let me jump back into the PowerPoint. All right, so in cases where we're engaging a party that's not really oriented to crash data, or maybe it's their first experience kind of analyzing more than just one table, because databases can be tricky, we offer monthly demonstrations to all of our users. So we go over all the basics of the tools, the different components and all the different modules that they have available to them. So they have the safety module, which I showed you first very briefly, and then the workbooks module, which I showed you briefly. We also provide one-on-one support and assist them in building out their own queries that they can save, they can share, they can return to later. And so not only does this provide kind of like a crash course, no pun intended, on how to use the tool, but it really puts a face to a name, and it kind of creates that, I guess you can call that like the, you know, client relationship, if you will, where they now know who I am, I know who they are, and it creates this kind of circumstance where they feel more likely to kind of reach out to me if they have any questions or need clarification. So it definitely fosters relationship. For folks that like to do it on their own, I'm definitely guilty of that. I try to figure it out all on my own before I ask anyone for help. We provide those individuals with our online documentation. So it goes over all the basics of the tools, what happens if you forget your password, how to quickly export data into a spreadsheet. But the most important thing that it has is a list of all of our searchable terms. So we have a whole data dictionary in there that they can go in, see what is available for them to search by and how to, I guess, break their crash data down by. But they can also see what the difference is between a pedestrian involved crash and a pedestrian crash type, right? They sound very similar, but in New Jersey, we look at them two different ways. And so we provide all of this information to them in our online documentation. And we did that all for free. It's through GitBooks. They're able to kind of come in. We have a kind of a quick start, how to log in again. And then this is our bread and butter, really, our searchable terms. Again, so folks are able to come in and see everything that has a bullet point. These are all elements or attributes that they are able to kind of filter and query the data down by. And they found that to be very, very helpful when they're trying to navigate the tool on their own. So really my go-to phrase when working with folks is call me. You know, at the end of the day, this is what I'm paid to do. I'm paid to provide data analysis and analytical support to not only the Division of Highway Traffic Safety in New Jersey, but all of the Division of Highway Traffic Safety stakeholders and safety professionals in our state. We are a towards zero death state. It's all of our goals to, you know, reduce the number of our roadway fatalities to zero as quickly as possible. So we wanted to provide a tool that allows a user to go in easily and filter data, narrow down an immense database to tell you a story. And I'm here to help them interpret that story. And we recommend using the tool, right, to find more general trends and contributing factors. But whenever they are faced with a real intimate problem or a crash circumstance that requires much more deep precision, then we want them to contact us. You know, we want to help them out and make sure that they're getting all of the information they need and the most accurate information possible. We're able to kind of provide a remote assistance capability, right? So when folks can reach out to us, we can help them out remotely. They can call me about the queries that they've started to build, and maybe they already saved it and they didn't know if they entered it correctly, or you know, they wanted to make sure that the filtering criteria was true. So they can give me a call and say, hey, did I do this right? And I can say yes or no. and I can quickly from my end adjust their queries. I can save them. Or if they didn't even start, they can call me and say, hey, I need motorcycle information broken down by county. Can you help me out with this? And I can quickly go in, create a filter, and share that filter or query with that individual. And so now not only are they able to go in and get their motorcycle crashes by county, but they can get it broken down by all of the fields that are within our crash database. And it really allows us to kind of build that trust. It allows us to engage with our audience, and really it's a give and take scenario. So we're able to provide a technical need and a technical assistance that they may require in making their data-driven decisions. But it also helps us understand what it is they need. You know, there are so many different ways that you can break down data, especially when you're working, you know, with close to, I think our database is close to like 13 or 14 gigabytes. Which is small considering some databases, but allows us to figure out what they want out of a system. How do they interpret data? How do they need it spelled out for them? So this back and forth communication really, really helps us out with all of that. So really our results, we think that our consumers have like a lot easier time obtaining all the information that they need. We think that because of that, more analysis is being done. So in the past, if it was too difficult or they didn't trust their results, they didn't know if they put their query in correctly and they keep getting a different number back every time they use it, you know, the user would be more reluctant to actually use the system. But because they're getting the same numbers, it's so easy to use, it's intuitive, it's customizable to their need, you know, they're doing more analysis. They're coming back to the system and utilizing it more and more. Our questions that we get for data assistance, they're getting way more specific. So when I started about 5 years ago, you know, I would get questions, you know, how many pedestrian crashes happened in my town? Can you break that down by year for me? And, you know, I would do that for them. But now the questions are, how old were those pedestrians? What were they doing? Who was at fault in the crash? What time of day did it take place? So the questions are becoming more and more specific because they can see it, they can interact with the data, and all of those answers are right at their fingertips. A lot of our recurring questions go away. So I used to keep this running log of summaries and create these long summaries of statistics for police departments and townships, and basically guess. They'd say, hey, can you tell me what's going on in my town? And I'd have to create this long-winded summary of guessing how they want their information broken down. Do they, you know, do they want pedestrian crashes broken down by month, or do they want all crashes broken down by month? Do they want both? And so I was left in this lurch of, you know, how much and how little information do I provide to this person requesting it? They don't even know what's available to them to request. So how far do I go in my analysis? And now they're able to do it themselves. And so these reoccurring questions of, hey, can you update this spreadsheet you did for me last year? I don't get those anymore because folks can go in and do it themselves, and with the confidence knowing that they're doing it correctly. And because of that, they can see all of the same data that they've been using for the past few years. They can actually see it now. So we have users come in and say, hey, I just filtered for my town. How come there's crash points showing up outside of my town? And I'll say, do you know that part on the crash report that identifies the crash location, and we have a latitude and longitudinal you know, places to put the lat and long information? And they'd say, yeah. And I'd say, well, that's very important, because if we don't have the correct information going into the report, I'm not going to be able to give you the correct information in the interface. So now they're putting two and two together, being able to see the distinction between the crash report not being just for insurance purposes, but also for their and my analytical needs. So the quality of our data is becoming improved just because of this tool in itself. It allows them to really dive deeper, right? They can ask more meaningful questions, and again, that confidence of the results that they produce. That's really all I have for you guys today. We've had a really busy year. And we have an even busier one ahead of us. We really look forward to kind of continuing our data efforts in New Jersey and working with New Metric. They've been such an excellent partner in really fulfilling our data needs and visualization needs. And like I said, I really look forward to working with them in the future. I guess we're going to go to questions now, or?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thank you very much. We appreciate you sharing that story and that excellent overview of how you've been able to empower several different agencies to utilize the data that has been made available. We do have time for questions, but before we get into some of the questions, I'd like to quickly highlight a few resources for everyone here on the webinar. Please visit our website, www.numetric.com. There you will be able to access a full New Jersey case study that we've done with Joe, so it can provide some additional information beyond what Joe has shared here in this webinar. You'll just need to click on the resources section and you can access that. The webinar is being recorded again, and we will send a link out to each of you here in the webinar within the next 48 hours. A link to that will also be posted on the Numetric website. And if you have any questions or feedback from the presentation today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I put my email address there. Reach out with any questions or feedback you might have. So with that, we will hop into some of the questions that have popped up throughout this webinar. So Joe, one of the questions that we received was, what organizations did you partner with to make this initiative successful?
That's a great question. Really, we partnered with a number of organizations. Ultimately, we partnered with our New Jersey Department of Transportation. They're the ones who process all of the crash reports and information and populate and maintain the database that we use as the back end data to make the tool operate. But we also really partnered with our law enforcement agencies. They're our boots on the ground. They're the ones filling out our crash reports. They're the ones who, if we want to improve our data collection methods and the quality of our data collected at the scene, they're the ones who are going to be able to do it for us. So those are really the two primary organizations that we've kind of engaged with to make this as successful as possible.
Great, thanks, Joe. Another question here for you. The system looks pretty robust and you've been able to do quite a bit with it, with affecting several different agencies. How long did it take you to implement this type of system?
That's a great question. Because, well, it's taken us about 2 years to get to where we are today. And it took us 2 months to get all of our data into the system, verified, decoded, worked the bugs out, and we were live. So I believe we started in November, like late November, around Thanksgiving 2 years ago. And we were live with the system by mid-February. And I guess I'll say one of the cool things that I love about the system is that it is an annual subscription service. So any new features or product updates that Numetric launches, we benefit from as well. So what you just saw was actually the product of about 2 years long of product feature updates and just enhancements to the site overall that we definitely benefited from and were able to leverage.
Great, thanks, Joe. And I just wanted to quickly remind the participants here, please use the Q&A button to ask your questions. We've got a few through the chat, which we'll still ask, but I just wanted to remind you to please use that Q&A button. Okay, next question. Joe, looking back at this process, what would you do differently or what would you change?
I mean, to be honest, nothing. What I wish I could change was the quality of our data. I'm sure everyone in the nation has the same issues as us. You know, anytime we even want to add data that we're capturing at the scene, how do we account for previous years? Like we just enhanced the number of child restraint systems on our crash report that could be filled out by the officer. You know, so how do we go back to previous years and fix all of those kind of data points and remap and rework the data? But in regards to kind of engaging with the tool, I wouldn't have done anything differently.
Great. Okay. Question for you is, can you protect the data from the Freedom of Information Act requests or from FOIA?
No, you can't. However, we wouldn't receive those requests at Rutgers, so we steward the data. The data is owned by the division or Department of Transportation in the state, so one could easily obtain you know, a physical copy of a crash report if they fill out an OPR request to any local police department where a crash occurred, or directly to the state of New Jersey itself. You know, ultimately, this is open information. We just protect, you know, who's consuming it on this platform.
All right. Another question, does New Jersey use other tools or software to do crash analysis, safety prioritization, such as identifying high crash or crash rate locations statewide? Or is this the sole crash data analysis tool used by New Jersey?
Well, I mean, I would hope that it is not the only, you know, data analysis tool used by professionals in New Jersey. You know, every tool has strengths and weaknesses, and I know of a number of agencies that, you know, may use, you know, the crash analysis tool, the Numetric platform that we maintain. They take the information out and then they will map it using Google Maps. They create their own micro databases for their own towns. We provide, like I said, an easy to use platform for folks to engage in the information. I know that DOT has one very oriented for engineering work. And I'm sure that there's a number of other platforms out there. I think Rowan University consumes some of the raw data directly from DOT themselves and maintain their own crash database of sorts for, you know, internal purposes. So.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Another question, how did you decide on Numetric versus other systems with so many choices out there?
There are many choices out there, you're right. Well, a couple of different reasons. One was the ease of use, and right off the bat, it looks like a modern product. A lot of the products out there were developed many moons ago and were enhanced and enhanced and enhanced over the course of several years to accommodate today's, you know, needs. And so what I was seeing was a lot of, you know, systems that could do things, but didn't necessarily do all of the things or were expandable. And there's a huge gap between being able to get data out of a system without typing in some sort of structured query language, and then systems that only allowed you to engage in the visualizations. We found that Numetric gave you kind of a happy medium. It allowed you to provide a query input. You could type it in. You can you know, click on pre-made visualizations that will automatically filter the data. But it doesn't require you to understand any structured query language. We were able to create the relationships between the tables for people so they can view vehicle level information through our crash data. So that's like a many to one table join. We were able to do things like that on the back end. And again, you know, just meeting with the folks over at Numetric and kind of seeing their, you know, the trajectory of the product that they're looking to develop moving forward. We wanted to be a part of that. So ultimately, we decided to move forward with Numetric.
Awesome, Joe. And thank you to everyone who's asked questions thus far. I think they've been outstanding. We still have a few more. Another question, can you add congestion information to crashes?
Absolutely. You can add, if you have a way to link really any data set to a crash event, you can link it. So you can, we have what we call the straight line diagrams in New Jersey. So we were able to pull in a lot of roadway elements such as lane counts, lane width, speed limits, jurisdiction, functional class, all of the attributes, or rather elements, that you would need to do things like network screenings or any other safety analyses. I know I don't have access to the data yet, but I know there's some states utilizing the platform that have all of their signage data in there, all of their utility data, where their utility poles are located, where all of their barriers, culverts, ditches, all of this information pertaining to their infrastructure, they have it in the database and have it linked to the crash records as well. So again, super customizable. If you have the data and are able to match A to A, then you can sure merge all that information into it.
Thanks, Joe. And just to expand on that a little bit, we do have other states that have added, as you mentioned, Joe, a lot of asset data, roadway information, and we've been able to merge that with the crash data set in order to provide that kind of holistic view of what is actually occurring at the site of the crash. The other thing it does is actually we're able to then write logic to provide potential countermeasures. So that way users can, as you've seen Joe, query so easily by searching terms. You can go ahead and search what areas could have been mitigated by, having rumble strips on the side of the road. And utilizing the attributes from the different data sets and assets to see what's actually out in the field, we can recommend certain types of treatments. I have another question for you, Joe. How often are the data sets in Numetric typically updated? And are there any barriers to frequent updates?
Yeah, so in a day and age of timeliness, that's an important question. So you can update the data as fast as you can turn it around. So you can push it daily. You can set up your local server. The way we have it set up is we store everything locally on a machine right in our office, just so we could troubleshoot any issues, connection issues, updates. We can physically touch the machine without having to go across campus or something like that. But yeah, we can schedule data pushes to anytime we update our crash database on our server, it will automatically get sent to Numetric. It's like a live feed. So Numetric, you can schedule it to come in every hour if you want, and say, search for any new records that were added after such and such timestamp, and it would pull in all of those records easily. We don't have that ability right now with how fast we get our data. We get daily pushes from the state's Office of Information Technology, where the New Jersey State houses our data. But we like to take it in and we like to clean it a little bit, kind of massage the data set. We add probably about 20 to 25 different calculated fields, right? So those are your, was this crash pedestrian involved or motorcycle involved, single vehicle? Like I said, we have about 20 emphasis areas. And then we also add CABCO weights for each of the crash severity levels. So that helps a lot of our engineering folks really kind of weigh our crashes. If they want to kind of aggregate all of the crash points in a specific region, they can figure out which site requires more prioritization over another. But again, that's only as fast as we're able to kind of take the data in, clean it, process it, and spit it back out. But ultimately the answer is every hour if you want, and there are no barriers to that at all, other than ones that you may create for yourself.
Awesome. One question for you, Joe. How do you plan to improve this process or product in the future?
Well, I have lots of pie in the sky ideas, Jake, as you would know. But we have a lot of different, dreams, I guess we can call them, that are definitely feasible. And it all goes back to integrating those data sets or trying to. So what we did over the past 2 years was we took crash data, we cleaned it, we showed people and have been showing people what we can do with it, how we can enhance the data. Like we added a column for our New Jersey State Police. So now they can type in the letter A, and we have 4 different troop divisions, A, B, C, and D. And so now the commanding officer for Troop A can just type in the letter A and pull up all of Troop A's reported crashes. They don't want to see anyone else's crashes. They don't want to see locals. They don't want to see any of the other troops. They just want to see their troop. So they're able to quickly go in and kind of monitor their own trends. But we were able to do that for them in the back end. That wasn't a field on our crash report. We were able to customize that for them. So we're always trying to enhance the crash database. But now that we've mastered that, one of the things that we'd love to do is pull in additional data sets, namely the citation data. So I always like to say, when working with law enforcement community, crash data, I can tell you where the drunk driver hit a tree, but I can't tell you with crash data where they're getting pulled over. What are the streets and areas that police officers are pulling over and arresting folks for driving under the influence of alcohol. And so I would love to get my hands on DWI citation data, speeding citation data, distracted driving, all of our emphasis areas, and then match that with crash data. So it'll tell you both parts of the story. So I could tell you where the speeding cars are crashing, but if I can get where the speeding drivers are getting caught and overlay them on top of one another, it tells a completely different story. And that's one I'd love to tell.
Great, Joe. Thank you. And that looks like we've got about 3 minutes left. That actually answered all of our questions today, Joe, but I wanted to thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. Again, I wanted to reiterate that we will be sending out an email with a link to this recorded webinar, and there will be future webinars where we will feature some of our network screening capabilities where we can prioritize roads, running a benefit cost analysis very quickly and easily, running safety reports that you can incorporate with every project, roadway project that you do, as well as Joe just mentioned, incorporating citation data into the Numetric platform. So those are some topics that we will be covering in the near future on these webinars. So I wanted to thank you all for taking time out of your day to spend with us, and have a great day.